What is going on, guys? In today's video, I will show you how to defeat every single boss in Throne of Liberty. Overall, we have a lot of bosses, each one with its own unique mechanics and a lot of simple ways to kill it quickly. So let's start off with Kowazan. The normal Kowazan spawns during the daytime, while the Lycan Kowazan only spawns during the night. And the normal Kowazan will randomly cast AoE poison knives all around him, in a large radius twice in a row that can't be dodged if you're in range. Players should be able to simply face tank the knives and rely on a healer to recover any lost health. After the second cast of knives, the boss uses a melee fury attack that can be blocked by paying attention to the purple fury attack indicator. He also has melee and ranged basic attacks that are used depending on who holds aggro. If a ranged player steals aggro, the boss swaps to ranged attacks and then jumps on top of the target, so you want the tank to always keep the aggro. After saying, "Are you the leader?" Kowazan spawns a glowing green aura underneath a random player in the arena. The green light emits from the ground, and the boss throws multiple knives in almost a 180-degree AoE cone that deals damage and stacks poison on anyone hit. And finally, when Kowazan says, "Filthy, useless, I'll take you all down in an instant," he gathers green smoke towards him while sucking randomly selected players in. After the vacuum pull, Kowazan deals an AoE blast that marks and debuffs the selected player with a knife and green aura above their heads. If you're marked, you have to run and touch the bodies of other players who are unmarked to spread the debuff. If you fail to spread the debuff, you are then lifted into the air and then killed. And then, on the other hand, the Lycan Kowazan has the same stuff, just plus the boss pushes players back in a large AoE and marks 6 random players in the arena with blue moon symbols. Players must match their moon with another to form a yellow full moon. A yellow AoE also appears at random where one of the blue moons were matched. You can stand in this AoE to receive a damage buff. Also, the Lycan Kowazan sucks players in, and 6 to 7 at random are marked with a red moon. Additionally, several other players are marked with red lights. Players with a red moon above their heads must immediately run to the boss as fast as possible and hug it. If even one person with a red moon is late, Lycan Kowazan begins killing players who were marked with the red light at random. Next we have Archboss Queen Bellandir. Here is her location on the map, and she is scheduled to spawn on every Saturday at 10 PM server time. Similar like with the Kowazan, you need to pay attention to her fury attacks, otherwise she will grab and launch you into the air, dealing massive damage. However, both of her fury attacks are melee to mid-range, so long-range players hardly have to worry about them. When Queen Bellandir spawns, it stuns all nearby players for a few seconds, and during the fight she will shout inaudible words and then dig her head underground, spawning a massive sandstorm that covers the majority of the arena and sucks players into the center. You want to do your best to keep away from the middle of the sandstorm or try to run out of it, or else you get one shot once the mechanic ends. Throughout the fight, Bellandir also launches larvae, which latch onto randomly selected players. These players must run quickly away from their teammates because the worms explode, one-shotting most players caught in the AoE. And finally, pay attention to when Bellandir is about to hit 10% health, as she will leap into the air and land, dealing massive damage to everyone within melee range. Overall, this boss is not the hardest if you know her mechanics. Bring with yourself at least 20 to 40 Queen's Venom Neutralizer potions. She will be poisoning everyone in the arena throughout the fight with a strong poison damage. So when you are hit with it, you want to use the potion to cleanse it quickly. The mechanic happens fast and also includes a brown shockwave or blast to help notify you are the mechanic. Next up we have Talus, and here is his location on the map. So when fighting Talus, make sure to pay attention to the mechanics as this is a very popular PvP spot for most guilds. His general patterns are dealing basic melee attacks, and if no players are within range, it emits pulsating damage in an AoE that also knocks players back. Make sure to always have a tank on Talus to prevent AoE damage and CC. The majority of Talus fight involves a series of 3 large AoE mechanics, which you can avoid by watching out for 3 of these sides. First, when Talus raises its hands and then smashes the ground, knocking all players within the inner area into the air. Most players face tank this mechanic and rely on the healer to use afterward. Second, when Talus says expel magic, it splits apart and begins to spin uncontrollably, spawning a massive windstorm that covers the entire boss arena. Run to the center of the arena to avoid the massive damage that occurs at the end of the animation. You can also avoid damage by running outside of the AoE. And finally, when Talus says damage restores, it spawns 3 stones at the edges of the inner arena. All players must run to one of these stones to obtain a blue shield that protects them from being one-shot at the end of the animation. You must touch the stone with your body to get the shield. Next up we have Malakar, and this is his location. This boss can be one of the most fun and frustrating bosses to fight because of how easily the mechanics can be messed up by many players. So first off, pay attention to Malakar's purple fury attack indicator, which is cast frequently during the fight. Malakar charges up electrical projectiles that must be blocked to avoid being stunned. Start counting from 1 up until 3 when Malakar casts the first fury attack. On the third fury attack, Malakar will always perform its teleport, petrify, and vacuum mechanic. Always run to the edge of the arena and hide behind a pillar, wall, or a rock to avoid being pulled in. He also casts from 1 to 2 red eyes above players. If there are 2 red eyes, the one that is open shows who Malakar is focusing on. A melee player with the eye needs to kite Malakar around so it does not catch up to them. And if Malakar catches the person with an eye, it begins smashing the ground with a large AoE multiple times, dealing massive damage to all players within range. This boss also casts purple projectiles randomly at players throughout the fight. You need to dodge these projectiles before they hit the ground to avoid the AoE damage. On top of this, Malakar's iconic mechanic involves a teleport, petrify stun, and mass AoE pull that reaches more than half of the arena. Malakar teleports to the furthest player within its aggro pool, casts a massive AoE petrify stun, and then pulls all players using the same long-range AoE. To counter this mechanic, it's important to pre-select, preferably a DPS playing at max range, to bait the teleport, and they can turn Malakar around to face away from the players so they don't get sucked in. Next we have Adentus, and here is his location. Adentus' fury attack involves him shouting, "This will be your grave," while preparing an AoE attack that chain pulls all players caught in towards him. You can easily block this attack by paying attention to the purple fury attack indicator by running out of range. When Adentus says overrun for the first time, he will cast a telegraphed attack that involves 3 glowing lines on the ground that erupt once the boss smashes its hammer onto the ground. The boss smashes the ground 3 times, and if you're caught in the AoE, you receive minor damage and become stunned. This attack is easy to avoid if you pay attention to the telegraph on the ground during the mechanic. And then when he says it again, this time it will spawn a bunch of yellow circles on the ground that explode very quickly, damaging and knocking players caught in the air. Overall, it is very important for a tank to always hold aggro and stay near the boss. If a player with aggro is not in melee range, Adentus begins using an arena-wide AoE. This AoE stuns players and deals heavy damage to everyone within the arena. Next we have Grand Aelon, and here is his location. This is the tankiest boss in Throne and Liberty, and because of this, he will drop some of the best tank gear in the game. So his mechanics are fairly simple. Grand Aelon will frequently cast its Fury attack ability throughout the fight. This ability involves a large AoE green shockwave that damages everyone in the arena. The purple Fury attack indicator is pretty slow, making his Fury attack easy to block. Also, a cone of thorns will spawn from the ground in a line, starting from Grand Aelon and then moving towards the arena's edge throughout the fight. Grand Aelon raises both hands in the air before delivering the attack. This attack does not deal much damage, so you don't have to worry too much about being hit. And finally, his signature mechanic is the Thorn Cages, which spawns to ensnare and trap randomly selected players. The boss says, "Struggle, ruthless ones," before locking the players inside the cages. Players must break the cages as quickly as possible to save those inside from dying. Next up we have the Morokai boss, and here is his location. Like all field bosses, he has a Fury attack that can be avoided by using your block. However, his Fury attack can bounce between nearby players, so make sure to hold your block to avoid heavy damage. From start of the fight, Morokai spawns small purple circles at the feet of randomly selected players. After about 3 seconds, the purple circles explode with lightning and deal a small amount of damage to the chosen player, and large damage to other players caught in the AoE. You must avoid other players if you are selected for this mechanic, otherwise you'll wipe the whole group. Also, when Morokai says, "I will burn everything I see," you must run behind one of the 4 pillars to avoid damage. Then at about 50% health, you will start to use a new mechanic that activates all pillars with purple lightning. And now 3 seconds from the activation, this time he will shoot lightning from his staff to a large number of players selected at random to deal massive damage. Next we have Excavator 9, and this is his location. This boss is also very similar to Morokai, so his fury attacks will involve a large wind-up, and then when he shouts wide range operation, the boss begins to spin 3 times, dealing AoE damage in a large radius. You need to watch for the purple fury attack indicator to time your block. Excavator 9 uses a mix of melee and mid-range basic attacks. The melee range basic attacks deal large damage and are directed toward the tank holding aggro on the boss. However, the mid-range attacks occur after Excavator 9 shouts wide range operation. He then proceeds to slam the ground 3 times. So at that point, you need to time your jumps to avoid taking damage. When the boss gathers purple particles in its left hand, it unleashes another mid-range AoE attack. You can dodge this ability by jumping again. And finally, he has another mid-range basic attack that occurs at random, where it slams its hammer into the ground, creating a fissure in the ground that launches player in the air. Afterward, the boss follows up with an AoE attack, shooting black smoke that turns player's hit into stone. Make sure to fly down in morph form if you are launched into the air to avoid fall damage. Next we have Junobote, and here is his location on the map. This boss can be accessed only when it's raining. Overall, this is a fun boss, which forces you into a group trivia event. You need to pay attention to the question asked during the true or false trivia phase and answer correctly. If you can successfully pass the short test, this boss is fairly easy to do. Junobote casts its fury attack often throughout the fight. It's a slowly charged ability that is easy to block if you pay attention to the purple fury attack indicator. After the fury attack, Junobote follows up with a melee range attack that covers a 360-degree area around it. Players must pay attention above their heads as Junobote marks a player at random with a red flaming orb. The person with the orb must turn Junobote away from other players to prevent them from getting hit by the flaming breath mechanic. The breath does not deal a lot of damage on initial impact, but you accumulate more burn stacks the longer you are hit by the flame breath. This boss also repositions to the center of the arena and lets out a big shout before flying into the air. Once in the air, he begins to cast AoE explosions. You need to stay out of the red telegraphed lines to avoid damage. And lastly, you know it is quiz time when Junobote says, "You have 2 choices, be right or be dead." The 2 statuses in the arena will light up, and players must gather within the green AoE under the Statue of Truth if the answer to the question is true, or perhaps on the Statue of Falsehood if the answer is false. If you gather under the incorrect statue, Junobote deals damage and knocks all players who were wrong out of the arena, which then requires you to fly back in. Next we have Cornelius, and here is his location. If it's nighttime, the doors of this dungeon are closed, so make sure to enter on time. When fighting Cornelius, make sure you remain aware of any AoE cast at your feet or nearby players to avoid massive damage. Cornelius's fury attack is a large AoE that damages players within the arena. You have to pay attention to the purple fury attack indicator as it's pretty slow and easy to block. Cornelius also lowers its left hand to the ground and launches a ghostly claw to attack and pull players towards it. You can run out of the AoE before it pulls you. When Cornelius says, "Kneel before your king," it shoots out 5 projectiles from its body in multiple directions, following the lines engraved in the floor of the arena. You must avoid these lines to avoid the attack. On top of this, he has a blue and red mechanic. The blue mechanic selects players at random and spawns a blue mark over their heads. Players with the blue mark must distance themselves from allies to avoid killing them. After 3 seconds, the marker spawns 5 blue AoE explosions that follow the target and damage surrounding players. Or then, the red mechanic also selects players at random and spawns a red mark over their heads, separate from the blue mechanic. Similarly to the blue mechanic, the mark spawns a single large red AoE explosion that damages surrounding players. So you again have to distance yourself from your allies to avoid killing or damaging them. When Cornelius spawns, it encloses the entire arena in a blue force field that prevents players on the floor from entering or leaving. To enter, players must go to the top of the surrounding Colosseum and fly over to the blue force field to get into the fight. Alternatively, you can stay inside the arena before Cornelius spawns to avoid getting locked out. Next we have Minezerok, and here is his location. This is a difficult boss that requires smart teammates who are coordinated to counter instant death mechanics. Minezerok's fury attack is connected to a one-shot arena-wide AoE mechanic. so you must pay attention to the purple fury attack indicator and make sure to block at the correct moment. After blocking, the boss releases dark magic all around itself and transforms into a black hole, pulling in all players within the arena. You then need to wait about 8 to 9 seconds before starting to morph sprinting towards one of the grapple hooks located on the northwest and southeast sides of the arena. Make sure to spam your grapple hook button to ensure you dodge the wave of dark energy moving towards you that one-shots almost all players it touches. Minezerok deals melee range damage to the tank holding aggro. A tank must aggro throughout the fight to control the direction of the 30-degree AoE cone mechanic that deals massive damage and can easily kill players behind the tank or who are caught in a CC. Players must watch out for when Minezerok charges its staff for about 3 seconds before delivering the powerful cone blast. He also spawns a gray spectral portal at the same animation. An easy way to avoid this mechanic is by doing DPS while standing on the opposite side of the person holding the aggro. The boss spawns multiple expanding lines of black smoke and particles on random players that repeatedly deal damage starting from one edge of the line to the other. You must run out immediately as they deal massive damage if you stand in them. And finally, Minezerok has a mechanic commonly called the soul mechanic. The boss selects player at random to stun in an attempt to steal their souls. Players must CC or heavily damage the souls walking towards Minezerok from the bodies of the chosen players to prevent them from dying. Next we have Ahzreil, and here is his location. This boss has a slow fury attack which is easy to dodge, as it can damage and stun all players within range. You must pay attention to the purple fury attack indicator to ensure you are hitting your block at the correct moment. Ahzreil's signature move involves fire and totems. 3 totems spawns randomly around the arena close to Ahzreil, and multiple players are also simultaneously sucked into Ahzreil, and 3 of them become randomly selected to receive an AoE ticking time bomb floating over their heads. Selected players must use these bombs to explode and destroy the totems. The totems cannot be destroyed by anything else. It is ideal to have 0 totems remaining to ensure no one takes massive AoE damage. However, if 1 totem remains, players lose about half or even more HP. Throughout the fight, Ahzreil spawns blue circles on the ground under the feet of randomly selected players. These circles are telegraphs letting you know that a meteor is about to fall from the sky to deal AoE damage. A trick to avoid the explosion AoE wipe from the totem phase is to run behind one of the large cylinder pillars at the edge of the temple. Next up we have Chernobog, and this is his spawn point. Cherno's fury attack involves a small wind-up into a AoE tail swipe that stuns and pushes players back directly behind the boss. The boss will say something before next attacking phase. The purple fury attack indicator for this ability is quite slow, so it is very easy to block. When Chernobog spawns, it ascends from the ground, knocking surrounding players while also dealing damage. So if you want to avoid getting hit, then just keep a 10-meter distance from his spawn point. One of the boss's key moves is a burrow attack that can occur at random. The boss once again says a longer random phrase before diving underground and poking its head up at a random nearby location to stun and knock players back. The boss again goes down after this and then ascends from the ground the second time, knocking surrounding players into the air. Once the boss lands, it emits a gray petrifying spray that turns all enemies caught into stone. When burrowing, this boss can perform multiple burrows before ascending from the ground. If you're poisoned by Cherno during this mechanic and under-geared, you can avoid death by standing in front of the boss and getting petrified. Next we have another arch-boss called Tevent. He is scheduled to appear on every Wednesday at 10 PM server time. Similar to Queen Bellandir, Tevent's fury attack has a slow purple fury attack indicator that is easy to block. Sometimes, Tevent casts the same fury attack twice in a row, so make sure to have enough stamina to block twice. He also will cast purple lines on the ground that spawns bones after 3 seconds. Pay attention to the ground and run out of this telegraphed mechanic to avoid damage. Also, when Tevent says, "plummet to the depths of hell," it dashes 2 to 3 times toward the edge of the arena in random directions, dealing enough damage to one-shot players who aren't tanky. After the final dash, he jumps back to the center of the arena, dealing massive AoE damage that covers the entire inner platform. You then need to move away from where he is facing after it shouts to avoid getting hit by the dashes. It's easier to face tank the AoE damage when the tevent jumps back to the middle of the arena. You can easily time your jump to avoid damage if you're too squishy, or run off the inner platform and into the water to avoid the AoE damage. Throughout the fight, Tevent's left hand glows purple as it prepares to cast lightning that falls from the sky on multiple randomly selected players, applying a massive debuff. With correct timing, you can block the lightning. However, you can also cleanse this debuff by jumping into the waterway and standing under the waterfalls. If it's raining, you just have to jump into the river formed in the waterway. Then next we have Nirma, and this is her location. Similar like Aridus, the doors of this open-world dungeon close during the night, so make sure to be on time. Nirma is a pretty complicated boss. All players should position themselves opposite of the marked player to avoid AoE damage and a fury attack that bounces to a player near the marked target. When Nirma says, "Cry in desperation," it casts electrical AoE that covers a part of the platform in a large cone. The person who is marked must move clockwise or in an agreed direction with their team to kite the electrical AoE away from allies. Everyone needs to avoid being hit by this AoE as it places a debuff on you that significantly reduces the healing you receive. Getting 1 stack of this debuff cuts healing in half, and receiving 2 stacks will give you 0 healing received. And lastly, when Nirma spins and raises its staff in the air while gathering electrical current towards his body, it casts an AoE attack that hits everyone on the platform. You must learn to time your jump to avoid the AoE blast. You can also face tank the damage and rely on your healer to restore your health, but this gives you quite a lot of risk. And then for the last and final field boss we have Aridus, and here is his location. He will only spawn during the night, so make sure to be inside the dungeon, as the doors will close right after he spawns. Throughout the fight, Aridus casts a line of green gas that deals massive damage. You need to rely on your healer to restore your health if you are hit, or dodge the damage by paying attention to the boss to watch the casting animation. The animation for the cone looks like Aridus is spawning a portal. He also has a sleep mechanic that puts everyone on the platform to sleep. The 3 players with the wasps and those around him are the first to be woken up by wasps' AoE damage. If you are slept within the inner circle of the platform, you're safe from instant death. However, if you're slept on the outer ring, the players with the wasps have to run past you, allowing it to deal damage to you so you can wake up and move to the inner circle. After a delay, those who aren't woken up in the outer ring instantly die. Also throughout the fight, Aridus maintains a summon of 3 wasps that follow 3 randomly selected players marked by a green light. The wasps deal damage in a small AoE when they are near players. The wasps are needed during the sleep mechanic, so don't kill them. And the new wasps will spawn after the sleep mechanic ends to prepare you for the next one. And that's about it. So if you enjoyed this video, click like, subscribe, and comment. If you are interested in more content, check out my channel and I'll see you in the next one. So take it easy, peace.